It wasn't unavoidable. You just had to stop cutting my spine when I yelled, "Stop! You're cutting my spine!"
Quit complaining! My body rejected your liver, and now I've got Garfield syndrome. Oh, I hate Mondays.
Who here has heard of a newspaper?
Did you ever smoke crack?
Crack? No.
Yeah, it's been a while, but back then, instead of getting your daily news on the internet or TVs, they would come in loads of paper that would be tossed on your front porch for you to read. Very exciting stuff, if you are boring. Now, I like to go through all the cartoon strips that was in the back of the news, because that's what kept my feeble little brain from wandering around. And there definitely was a variety to choose from. Foxtrot was an easy favorite with its funny family dynamic. Bloom County took on politics while incorporating talking animals in the mix like Opus the Penguin. Zitz was about this teenager going through his social life with his parents and friends. Pearls Before Swine is an insanely funny satire with another bunch of funny animals. Then there's Leo. Like, what was that strip? But of course, you also have your syndicated classics like Peanuts, Garfield, The Far Side, and who couldn't forget Calvin and Hobbes, quite possibly the greatest comic strip of all time, or at least in my opinion. Something about that mischievous little kid and his stuffed tiger who go on made-up adventures with so much playfulness and sardonic behavior at the same time was so gratifying to read, and definitely something creator Bill Watterson had legal control over. Yeah, there was no merchandising for Calvin and Hobbes whatsoever. Watterson explained that this would lead to the strip being commercialized, a negative influence on the art of cartooning, and sure, I gotta respect his wishes on that. But oh man, we were really close to an actual cartoon for the duo. Watterson was interested into putting Calvin and Hobbes as moving images, but didn't really want to work with a team of animators, and also didn't really like the idea of giving Calvin a voice. So many people wanted to work with Watterson. Big names too. Jim Henson, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg. We could have gotten a crossover between Hobbes and Yoda in a different timeline. But no, Watterson stayed true to his guns and kept the strip as is, stating it was a low-tech, one-man operation that he was proud of. But that got me thinking. Sure, Calvin and Hobbes is a beloved comic that stayed true to itself and didn't become a commercialized sellout, but does that mean the other classic comic strips are? I mean, we all know Charlie Brown and Garfield, but they probably wouldn't have gotten their icon status if it weren't for branching out beyond the newspapers. And many strips have gotten their lime in the spotlight too when on the small screen. It doesn't hurt to get your little doodles to start moving and getting their own cartoon. And that's what we'll be looking at today. The stars who started out as a simple drawing to a full-blown animated character within the decades. Now, keep in mind, these are only the characters that were in 3-panel strips that you would read daily. You know, the Sunday funnies. So absolutely nothing based on comic books or graphic novels. None of that. I understand that Batman and Spider-Man have had their share on the papers before, but I will not be including them. I'm also only looking at characters that have gotten an animated series to their name, rather than a special or a film. So I apologize to all the Ziggy fans out there. And that includes Over the Hedge. Yeah, but you didn't know that was a comic, huh? Now, technically, the first ever comic strip to hit newspapers was The Yellow Kid, but he has yet to make an appearance in animated form, which is alright with me, he's kinda freaky looking. Actually, the first comic strip icon to ever get a cartoon was, surprisingly, Popeye.
I'm Popeye the Sailor Man. I'm Popeye the Sailor Man.
Yeah, even I'm shocked. I never knew the Spinach Man started out as a comic strip. Well, technically, he debuted in another comic that was already in its 10th year, Thimble Theater, but quickly became the main character because he was that popular. Which is funny, considering his first ever adventure on that strip had him get shot countless times. But yeah, Popeye won the hearts of many, including Olive Oyl, who already had a boyfriend in the strip, but since has been kicked out due to Popeye's growing popularity. In fact, pretty much everybody that was in Thimble Theater, besides Olive, all got replaced by newer characters that would help define the Popeye franchise. Wimpy, Bluto, Eugene the frickin' Jeep. All this culminated into Paramount releasing some cartoons in the 1930s starring the Sailor, and just shot up the stratosphere in Hollywood. Spinach got a huge upgrade thanks to Popeye's constant use of the leafy green, giving him subhuman powers, and probably persuading the audience to eat them as well.
Boy, give me my spinach, I'll show you.
Popeye's greatest rival at this time was Mickey Mouse, often clashing between shorts and theaters, with both claiming victors in their own rights. It's funny considering Popeye was never meant to be this huge star. He entered the frame as a rough-edged supporting character. Yet, within months, readers gravitated towards him with an enthusiasm that surprised even the artists. Popeye's animated adventures expanded his world, introduced new characters, and cemented his role as a staple of American entertainment. What can I say? He's a sailor with a heart of gold. He is what he is.
I am what I am, and that's all what I am. I'm Popeye the Sailor Man.
Another very iconic character around this time was Felix the Cat. Now, Felix is a special case, since his cartoons and comic strips kind of came around the same time, so who's to say where Felix actually originated from? What I can say is that Felix has pretty much garnered international success. Felix the Cat occupies a unique and fascinating space in the history of the 1920s, a true pioneering figure whose rise to fame coincided with the very birth of the animated medium. Unlike many comic strip characters who later found their footing in film, Felix's popularity was forged almost simultaneously across the animated shorts and the comic strips. Felix cemented his status as the first truly international cartoon superstar, an effective visual design predating what Mickey Mouse would be. While the animation provided the spectacle of movement, the strip allowed a more continuous narrative and a deeper exploration of his personality. This is probably why his comic strip lasted longer than his silent films, considering cartoons were now including voices for the characters, and that dastardly Mickey leaped over Felix in stride. Still though, I gotta give a shout out to this lovable scamp. Alright, who's next?
Archie's here. No!
Oh god, I have to talk about Archie again?
You can't keep getting away with it!
This was your grandma's teen drama. Archie, this ego-driven sap of a man, this beta male.
He wasn't a top, and he wasn't a bottom. He was annoying.
Archie came to the public eye in 1941 when he was introduced in Pep Comics, and pretty much got the Popeye treatment, becoming so successful that he got his own ongoing comic series until 2020. If you're not too familiar with this schmuck, basically most of the storylines center around Archie and this love triangle he has with rich girl Veronica and next door neighbor Betty. There's also this character named Reggie who tries to compete against Archie for the girl's affection, and Jughead, the only character that I can stand, possibly coming to like him from time to time. Now, Archie has had a ton of animated shows under his belt. There was the 1968 Archie show, which also garnered the characters as the virtual band, making some popular singles like Sugar Sugar. So basically the old man's Gorillas. He also had some other shows around the 70s like Archie's Funnies and the US of Archie, but then in the 80s Archie went the baby spin-off route with the New Archies, a cartoon where Archie and his friends are de-aged as preteens attending middle school. All of the drama that made Archie famous are now reduced to kiddie stuff, like science projects gone wrong and who's gonna win class president. Also, this weird alien shows up. What? Now I can say that the 1999 reboot, Archie's Weird Mysteries, is a much better cartoon. Taking a slice out of the Scooby-Doo format, Weird Mysteries has the town of Riverdale being overrun by B-movie monsters, with Archie and his friends becoming detectives and solving strange mysteries happening around the town. The animation is pretty neat, and I like this new format for the game, this 90s X-Files inspired aesthetic that they got going for them. Hey, wait a minute. Did Archie actually have his strips on newspapers? I mean, yes, he did technically. There was a separate storyline of Archie and friends in newspapers focusing on gags and silly adventures, totally opposite from their comic book counterparts. But the comic book versions were obviously more popular in scope, so what am I doing here? I just wasted 2 minutes on Archie for goodness sake. Okay, now it's time for the Addams Family, everyone's favorite gothic and satirical family of weirdos. You got Lovebugs, Gomez, and Morticia who really can't get their hands off each other, fan favorite Wednesday for her morbid personality, kooky Uncle Fester, my personal favorite, Cousin It, the literal GOAT. Now the Addams Family was one of those single panel comics, you know, the ones that just have one illustration to tell their jokes. Now, funny enough, the Addams' first animated appearance was actually in a crossover with Scooby-Doo during their 70s series. Apparently the Scooby Gang become house sitters for Gomez and Morticia, and this robotic vulture comes in demanding the Addams to leave the property, then Wednesday all of a sudden just goes missing. Well, at least Cousin It is here.
That's why he's the GOAT!
While a forgettable crossover, this did lead the Addams Family to get their own cartoon a year later, following the same formula as Scooby-Doo, with the family traveling in their camper around America, causing mayhem everywhere they go. Hanna-Barbera helped animate this project, and the then 10-year-old Jodie Foster was the voice of Pugsley. Just think, in a world where Foster didn't take the role in Taxi Driver, she could have been a famous voice actress. Oh well. The other incarnation of the family was in 1992, probably because of the popularity with the live-action films around this time. This time, the family gets to stay in their mansion and deal with any issues occurring in their lives. Both cartoons really toned down the macabre of the Addams, trying to suit a more kid-friendly audience. Speaking of kid-friendly, Little Lulu.
Oh, little Lulu, I love you, Lou, just the same.
Another single-panel comic, at least in the early years. Little Lulu Moppet is a smart and stubborn girl who always starts a battle with her guy friends to prove girls are just as good as boys. That's my feminist icon right there. Little Lulu started as shorts in the late 40s, then got an HBO animated TV series in the 90s. But hold on there, partner, we just glossed over another animated show for the Flower Girl. Freaking Tokyo, Japan made a 1970s anime for the strip, something that I'm completely surprised about. Lulu having a cult following in Japan was not on my bingo card. But do you want to know who had a cult following in Australia? Surprisingly, Beetle Bailey. Bailey is an army soldier stationed at Camp Swampy, avoiding any work he possibly can, while getting a beating from Sergeant Snorkel. In 1963, both the US and Australia got 50 episodes of a Beetle Bailey cartoon, each being 6 minutes long. And what do you know, our favorite sailor is back again, because in 1972, Popeye had a 1-hour special called Popeye Meets the Man Who Hated Laughter, with a bunch of cameos from Beetle Bailey, along with other classics like Blondie, Barney Google, and Flash Gordon. Alright, let's move on to Dennis the Menace. Wait, what do you mean which Dennis? There's only one version of— oh, well, would you look at that? Idiot! Okay, so there's two very popular versions of Dennis the Menace, one from the US and one from the UK, and they both got the animated treatment too. Let's talk about the American version first. This Dennis is a little more genuine than he looks out to be, mainly because his antics are more youthful and enthusiastic. He's not really a menace, but does cause adults to have nervous breakdowns when he's around the corner, especially Mr. Wilson.
You fucking son of a bitch.
The UK Dennis, well, that's a menace right there. Titled Dennis and Gnasher, not to get confused with this guy over here, this Dennis is pretty much considered the world's naughtiest boy, spawning booby traps and stink bombs on every target he can find. This Dennis got 2 cartoons under his name, one from 1996 and one from 2009, both with some great animation and stellar voice casting too. Speaking of the UK, we got children's icon Rupert Bear. Another character I had no idea started as a comic strip, though I vaguely remember this bear airing on Cubo over here in America, the 90s version that is. And while we're over here beyond the pond, I gotta talk about the Finnish/Swedish strip, The Moomins. Very popular, even PewDiePie recommends this.
My mom dressed me up like her as a kid. I think I told this story. I went to school like this. Thanks, Mom.
These little hippo-like creatures are staples in Sweden, garnering a bunch of television series throughout its 50+ years. I personally like the 2019 version, with Snork being a personal favorite of mine.
You fainted. I forgot. You are quite soft.
Okay, we got to the classic comic strips, but I think it's high time we get to see more of the newer, yet still popular strips who got the cartoon treatment. Like the ever work-centered and surprisingly controversial strip, Dilbert, back in 1999. Some people may hate this strip, probably because of the office culture the strip takes place in, so some big words were involved here, like incompetence and meetings. UPN offered cartoonist Scott Addams 13 episodes to air on their network, and the show lasted for 2 seasons. You finally got to see Dilbert with a mouth here. Now, Addams has reported that the reason Dilbert got cancelled was because UPN wanted to focus on the African American audience of their shows, and canceled Dilbert because Addams was white. Well, that's probably the tamest thing I heard him say.
Best advice I would give to white people is to get the hell away from black people. Just get the fuck away.
I do actually like the 1999 series. It kind of has a laid-back, slice-of-life feel to it, although no one is really going out to seek out the strips anytime soon.
Let's just say I didn't see that memo. Right? Memos? Work is boring, but it can be.
Baby Blues also got an adult-oriented cartoon airing on the WB and later Adult Swim. In the strips, the McPherson family has 3 children, Zoe, Hammy, and Ren. But the cartoon here focuses more on parents Daryl and Wanda, with Zoe as their newborn. There's also a bunch of newer characters created specifically for the show, like the Bitterman family and Babysitter Busy. Mother Goose and Grimm was also a pretty popular strip that got its TV series in the early 90s. Known for its pop culture references and recent news around the time of the 80s and 90s, the animated series definitely strips back most of what made Grimm feel fresh, and just smack on a predictable, kid-friendly version of the strip that had flat timing with the jokes and a very boring direction with some of the plots. Well, at least the art style sticks to its source material. Hey, wait a minute, where the heck is Ralph? Why does Atelia look like that? This isn't my Grimm!
Let's start a riot.
Okay, these next 2 cartoons came from Adult Swim exclusively, one being a flagship series for the block, and one you probably never heard of. Let's start with the big one first, The Boondocks. The Boondocks began as a daily and Sunday comic strip created by Aaron McGruder, debuting in 1996 on the hip-hop magazine, The Source. Focusing on the lives of 2 young brothers, Huey and Riley Freeman, who moved from the south side of Chicago to the predominantly white, affluent, and culturally sheltered suburb of Woodcrest, Maryland. to live with their grandfather Robert Freeman. The transition from the static medium of the newspaper strip to the animated series on Adult Swim in 2005 marked a significant leap in the property's cultural impact. The show retained the core characters and satirical edge, but elevated the production value with such a distinctive anime-influenced art style that lent itself to kinetic action and dramatic visual comedy. The move to television allowed the satire the strip was known for to breathe, providing longer narrative arcs and, crucially, the use of voice acting to fully realize the characters' personalities. And it's no wonder, the animated series exploded in popularity, becoming a flagship program for Adult Swim. A cultural touchstone that arrived at a time when nuanced discussions about black identity, the civil rights movement, and the relationship between pop culture and politics were gaining mainstream traction. This was a show Adult Swim needed and what the audiences deserved. On the other spectrum, who even remembers the Drinky Crow Show?
No.
If the Boondocks was a cultural touchstone for the block, the Drinky Crow Show was, well, a nihilistic hangover. Drinky Crow got his debut in Tony Millionaire's weekly comic strip, Mockies. Hope I'm saying that right. Debuting in 1994, Mockies ran in alternative weekly newspapers and was a masterpiece of literary satire. Drinky Crow, a chronically depressed sailor crow, and Uncle Gabby, a simple-minded drunken monkey, go on adventures typically involving horrific violence and excessive alcohol consumption, all rendered in Millionaire's stunningly turn-of-the-century drawing style. So, in 2007, Millionaire and Adult Swim brought Mockies to television as the Drinky Crow Show. The transition was a bit jarring. Millionaire's pen and ink style was translated into a choppy, intentionally low-budget looking flash animation that felt both reverent to the original art and utterly grotesque emotion. The show still kept its core themes: rampant alcoholism, existential dread, the sheer pointlessness of life, Drinky Crow's repeated attempts at suicide, only to be foiled by the incompetence of Uncle Gabby or a sudden chaotic plot development were a running gag. It had a unique style, but I think the Drinky Crow Show remains a morbid curiosity of an adaptation. It is a perfect time capsule of a moment when cable TV was willing to finance a show where the main character's only goal was to escape its own existence. And I don't think anything else today would come around like that with a green light. And while we're at it, let's throw in Spy vs. Spy in the mix. I've already made a separate video on this topic, but in summary, Spy vs. Spy is such a profound comic strip that turned its slapstick formula into new heights with the mad sketch shows aired in the 90s and 2010s. Go check those out. Newer comic strips have gotten the edge too. One of the more weirder ones was Iggy Arbuckle, a single comic strip that was part of the National Geographic Kids magazine. I faintly remember this comic strip back when my parents subscribed to the magazine for me and my siblings. Wow, that just knocked out a huge nostalgia blast from my noggin. Oh, the good old days. So, Iggy is a park ranger who works at this national park with his best friend Jiggers, a beaver. Pretty much every episode, they try to save the park's ecosystem from this catfish villain named Stu. Yeah, the animation kinda sucks, like what a normal Flash cartoon would look like, but at least it teaches you about the environment, right kiddos?
Oh, so Mother Nature needs a favor.
Okay, forget that one. How about an actual icon from Gen Z's childhood back in school? There was two big novels around the late 2000s that got preteens excited, Diary of a Wimpy Kid and Big Nate. Now, Diary of a Wimpy Kid is already an established franchise with live action and animated movies, but Big Nate was that underdog that just had that same cultural touchstone on the kids as well. Which, surprisingly enough, my generation grew up on his story-driven novels rather than the comic strips that he was based on back in the 90s. Oh, and he also showed up on that web multiplayer game Pop Tropica. Oh, Pop Tropica. Now, it took a while for Big Nate to get the TV treatment, but in 2022, Paramount decided to make a CG adaptation of the strips and books, and it's quite faithful to its source material, which is a good and bad thing. The animated series retains the focus of the strip, with Nate as the perennial underdog with an oversized ego, along with his dynamic with the main supporting cast, and the story keeping its narrative grounded in Nate's middle school perspective and minor rebellion. The show does feel familiar to longtime readers, although there are a lot of random WTF moments here. Heck, even with the mixed media being presented here, it kinda comes off as obnoxious in some cases. Even the regular stylized animation, while expressive, does feel a little dim. At least, the lighting of the series. It feels like the school is on a budget because this school does not like electricity for some reason. Why is the cafeteria and schoolroom so dark? That being said, it's still a faithful adaptation for kids to enjoy, and for people like myself who grew up with the titular 6th grader.
Would you do me the honor of being my...
But now it's time for the big boys. The ones you know are coming from a mile away. The all-time greats that were favorites from the strips, all the way to the TV screens, and even the silver screen too. Besides Calvin and Hobbes, these two were a staple for the Sunday Funnies and comics in general. And let's start off with everyone's favorite orange feline, Heathcliff.
No, 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 no.
Alright, we'll get to Garfield soon, but you gotta give it to Heathcliff for at least inspiring Jim Davis to what he would create. Although, Heathcliff and Garfield are completely different, due to Heathcliff's more energetic and streetwise personality, and a more physical and slapstick tone within every strip. And that translated to the 1980 and 84 cartoons as well. But in the end, Garfield got the long end of the stick, and has become famous, or I guess in modern times, infamous, for his lazy behavior and slightly funny jokes in his panels. You know, something grandmas on Facebook would love. The global impact of the animated Garfield cartoon is threefold. Jim Davis fully embraced merchandising for his furry friend. The strips and cartoons' popularity fueled us a massive array of products. This constant physical presence in daily life turned Garfield into a recognizable mascot, cementing his status as a piece of global pop culture long before the internet made viral icons commonplace. The cartoon series deepened the mythology of the strip too, thank goodness. While the comics relied on the same dynamic of Garfield and his mates, the show allowed for character evolution, often involving elaborate schemes, parodies, and even breaking the fourth wall. This kept Garfield relevant for a longer duration than a simple newspaper gag strip typically would. The success of the animated series laid the foundation for the character's subsequent reinventions, including the partially live-action CGI film series in the 2000s and the fully CGI series The Garfield Show, and even today, Garfield remains incredibly popular online, often repurposed in internet memes that appreciate his nihilistic attitude. Garfield and Friends was the engine that transformed Garfield from a popular comic character into an international multimedia icon. And by placing the Garfield segments alongside Davis's other works, the series broadened the humor while maintaining a consistent visual and tonal style. The animated format, distributed globally, ensured that a generation grew up not just reading the strip, but watching Garfield move, scheme, and sing. Garfield and Friends was the catalyst that propelled him to international stardom, transforming him into a cultural phenomenon whose influence is felt across multiple contents and media platforms. But even with Garfield's popularity, I don't think his motion even compares to Charlie Brown and the Peanuts strip. The importance of Charles M. Schulz's Peanuts cannot be overstated. Beginning in 1950, Peanuts introduced a revolutionary concept, using the often painful reality of childhood to explore adult themes of anxiety, existential dread, unrequited love, and failure. This is pretty much what cemented Charlie Brown and Snoopy as cultural icons that transcended the medium of the newspaper. While the daily strips built a loyal readership, it was the transition to television that catapulted Peanuts into the global consciousness. A Charlie Brown Christmas and It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown were landmark events. These were faithful, beautifully scored, and often poignant extensions of Schulz's vision. A Charlie Brown Christmas, in particular, is such a masterpiece for the franchise, using Charlie Brown's struggle to find the true meaning of Christmas to criticize the commercialization of the holiday, a message as potent today as it was 6 decades ago. And Charlie Brown himself, man, he is the perpetual underdog. Doomed to miss the football, fail to fly his kite, and be ignored by the object of his affection, the little red-haired girl, yet he always gets up for the next try. His significance lies in his relatability. He embodies this vulnerability and perseverance in the face of disappointment. He is the term of teaching generations that failure is a fundamental part of the human condition, and that self-worth is found not in success, but in the effort. By translating the script's emotional depth and gentle humor into moving, speaking images, the Peanut specials transformed Charlie Brown, Snoopy, Linus, and Lucy from newspaper staples into genuine, beloved cultural icons, forever associating with holidays, introspection, and the bittersweet poetry of growing up. Their enduring status proves that sometimes the simplest drawings can hold the most profound truths about life.
Here comes old Charlie Brown. Good old Charlie Brown. Yes, sir. How I hate him.
In the end, the journey of the comic strip from the printed page to the animated screen is just the enduring power of well-crafted characters. Look, like I said previously in the beginning, I highly admire and respect Bill Watterson and his 10-year opus that is Calvin and Hobbes. And while Watterson's choice to keep Calvin and Hobbes a pristine, uncommercialized work is undeniable, the legacy of characters like Popeye, Felix the Cat, and especially Garfield and the Peanuts gang proves that animation is often the necessary crucible for forging true cultural immortality. These shows amplified their emotional resonance and expanded their worlds, embedding themselves into the collective memory of generations. The transition from a static panel to moving images with voices and music transforms a daily chuckle into a lasting cultural milestone for the medium. Whether it's the social commentary of the Boondocks, the anarchic slapstick of Heathcliff, or the existential melancholy of Charlie Brown, these adaptations demonstrate that the best doodles aren't meant to stay still. They are meant to move, to speak, and to become the iconic stars that continue to shape our entertainment landscape today. And hey, these videos are what helps shape me to keep going and making more in the ongoing future. And I hope you come follow me on this journey as well. Please like and subscribe as I'm still a very small channel and will appreciate every single comment and click on my videos. Hey, even Jacksepticeye is supporting me.
I'm Jacksepticeye and this is my favorite channel on YouTube. There you go.
Until then, make sure you check out these comic strips and their animated incarnations down the road. And I will see you next time.